The factory loomed in the distance, its silhouette jagged against the night sky. A relic of a bygone era, the abandoned toy factory had long been a subject of urban legends. Some claimed it shut down due to safety violations, others whispered of something far darker, disappearances, cursed toys, things that moved on their own. None of that stopped Jake, Leah, Connor, and Will from sneaking in. Jake was the ringleader, the fearless one. He had dragged them into abandoned places before, but this was the crown jewel of their urban exploration adventures. Leah, the skeptic, rolled her eyes at every ghost story but always carried a flashlight with fresh batteries just in case. Connor, the tech geek, carried his camera, ready to capture proof of the paranormal. And Will? Will was the reluctant tag-along, never quite as eager but unwilling to be left behind. The factory's entrance was a rusted iron gate, twisted and bent in places. The fence had collapsed in sections, allowing easy access. As they stepped inside, the air grew thick with the scent of dust, rust, and something faintly sweet, like old plastic. Their footsteps echoed across the cavernous space. Towering shelves, once filled with dolls, board games, and rocking horses, now stood mostly empty. A few scattered toys lay abandoned on the floor, their faces cracked and eyes missing. A headless teddy bear slumped against a crate, its stuffing spilling out like guts. Connor lifted his camera and whispered, "This place is perfect." A distant noise, like a scuttling or a soft giggle, sent a shiver down Leah's spine. She turned, but nothing moved. "All right," Jake said, grinning. "Let's find the good stuff." They ventured deeper into the factory, unaware that something was watching. The deeper they ventured into the factory, the colder the air became. The vast, open floor was littered with remnants of a past that had long since crumbled. Half-melted plastic doll heads, rusted springs from wind-up toys, and old packaging boxes with faded, wide-eyed cartoon characters grinning up at them. Leah rubbed her arms. "Why does it feel colder in here?" "It's summer." Will hunched his shoulders. "Probably just insulation or something." Jake scoffed. "Or ghosts. Come on, don't wimp out on me now." Connor checked the footage on his camera. "So far, we've got some great shots of abandoned junk. But we need something creepy. Something viral." A sudden clatter made them all freeze. It came from the shadows of an overturned shelving unit. Jake turned on his flashlight, sweeping it across the floor. A doll stood there, perfectly upright. Its porcelain face was unblemished, with glassy blue eyes that seemed too real, too aware. Its tiny pink lips curled ever so slightly in a smile. Connor lifted his camera, whispering, "That wasn't there before." Leah's fingers twitched near her flashlight. "Maybe it fell from the shelf?" Jake stepped forward and nudged the doll with his foot. Toppled over. Nothing strange. No movement. Will exhaled. "Guys, we're freaking ourselves out." But as they turned to continue exploring, a soft noise rose behind them. Pitter-patter, like tiny feet on the factory's cold cement floor. Leah whirled around, her flashlight beam catching a blur of movement. Just a flicker, before darkness swallowed it again. Her pulse spiked. "Did you see that?" Will nodded, his face pale. "Something moved." Jake forced a laugh. "Rats. Just rats." Connor adjusted his camera. "Or something else." The group pressed forward, drawn deeper into the factory by equal parts curiosity and unease. Hallways stretched in eerie silence, lined with doorways leading to storage rooms filled with forgotten playthings. Some doors were slightly ajar, revealing glimpses of broken rocking horses and dust-covered teddy bears. Others were locked tight, their secrets forever sealed. Then they found the showroom. The space was massive, filled with glass display cases and rows of wooden shelves. At the center stood a circular stage where once, long ago, the factory must have showcased its best toys. But now it was a graveyard. Hundreds of dolls lined the shelves, staring blankly ahead. Some had missing eyes, others had hair that had thinned with age. One had a jagged crack running down its porcelain cheek like a frozen tear. And then, in the dim light, one of them blinked. Will gasped. "Oh my God." Leah gripped his arm. "Tell me you saw that." Connor zoomed in on his camera lens, his breathing sharp. "I definitely saw that." Jake, for the first time that night, was silent. The doll that blinked was sitting at the edge of the display, its tiny hands resting delicately on its lap. It wore an old-fashioned blue dress, the lace frayed with time. And then, in a small, childlike voice, it spoke. "You shouldn't be here." The air thickened with an eerie stillness, each of them frozen in place. "You shouldn't be here." The voice was small, almost delicate, yet the words carried weight. Something ancient and knowing. Leah swallowed hard. Did that just talk? Connor's hands trembled on his camera. I got it on film. Jake, always the skeptic, forced a laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. Okay, one of you is messing with me. But none of them were laughing. None of them were moving. Will took a slow step backward, his foot crunching against broken glass. The sound echoed, sharp and jarring. The doll's head tilted just slightly, its glassy blue eyes locking onto his. Go now before they wake up. The words slithered into the air, dripping with something worse than just a warning. Leah grabbed Jake's arm. We need to leave. Now. But before they could move, a sound filled the room. A slow, rhythmic creaking. Their flashlights darted wildly, searching for the source. Then they saw it. One of the rocking horses in the corner, old, faded, missing one of its glass eyes, was moving, rocking, back and forth, back and forth. No one was touching it. Connor cursed under his breath. Oh, hell no. Then, one by one, the dolls started to shift. Not all at once, just small, barely noticeable movements. A twitch of a finger, a turn of the head, a subtle, unnatural shifting, like something testing its limbs after a long sleep. And then a giggle, high-pitched, playful. But it came from nowhere and everywhere at once. The air turned ice-cold, their breath visible in thin white wisps. The scent of old plastic, dust, and something rotting filled their lungs. Leah's voice was barely above a whisper. Run. Jake didn't argue. They bolted. Through the showroom, past the motionless dolls. Though they swore they felt the weight of hundreds of unseen eyes tracking their movements. Connor nearly dropped his camera as they stumbled back into the main hallway. Then slam. A door ahead of them shut on its own, metal ringing through the silence. We'll skid it to a stop. Nope. 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 Jake grabbed the nearest door handle, yanking hard. Locked. Leah tried another. Locked. Connor panted, his camera swinging around wildly. Where's the exit? Where's the damn exit? Another giggle. Closer this time. Then, from the darkness ahead, a soft patter of small feet. They weren't alone. The dolls were moving, and they weren't letting them leave. The footsteps grew louder, a rapid patter of small, unseen feet moving toward them. Jake's hands trembled as he gripped the rusted doorknob. Come on, open. He slammed his shoulder against the door, but it refused to budge. Connor spun around, his camera trembling in his grasp. The flashlight attached to it flickered, casting erratic beams across the hallway. Shadows danced along the peeling wallpaper, stretching unnaturally. Leah grabbed Will's wrist, her voice taut with panic. We have to find another way. A whisper curled through the air, soft and childlike. Play with us. A porcelain hand slipped into the light from the hallway's darkness, its tiny fingers twitching as if stretching for the first time. Then another. And another. Dozens of small hands reached out from the shadows, their plastic and porcelain fingers flexing, crawling forward. Will screamed. Jake yanked at a rusted metal panel along the wall, his hands slick with sweat. Here, help me pull this off. Leah didn't hesitate. She dug her fingers into the edges, yanking as hard as she could. The old panel groaned before finally ripping free, revealing a narrow crawl space. Connor shoved his camera inside first. I don't care where this leads, Gio. Will was the first to squeeze through, his breath coming in panicked gasps. Leah followed, then Connor. Jake scrambled in last, his foot barely making it inside before something cold brushed his ankle. He kicked wildly, then shoved the panel back into place just as something scratched against the metal from the other side. The crawl space was tight and filled with dust, making it difficult to breathe. Their elbows scraped against the rough interior as they inched forward. Where does this even lead? Will whispered. I don't know, but we need to get as far away as possible, Leah said, her voice trembling. Connor clutched his camera, his hands still shaking. I swear to God, if we make it out of here, I'm never setting foot in an abandoned building again. They crawled for what felt like an eternity until, finally, the passage opened up into a dimly lit storage room. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with old boxes labeled prototype dolls, do not distribute. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and something stale, like fabric left to rot. Will stood up too fast, knocking into a shelf. A box tumbled over, spilling its contents. Dolls? Lifeless, unfinished, their hollow eyes staring up at them. Jake dusted himself off. Okay, we find a way out. Fast. Leah turned toward the door, but as she reached for the handle, she froze. The dolls on the floor had shifted. No one had touched them, but they were no longer lying where they fell. One sat upright. Another had turned its head just slightly, just enough to be watching. Then, a voice. Not the soft, childish whisper from before. Something older. Hungrier. You shouldn't have come. The lights flickered. Then the dolls began to move. One twitched. Another lifted its tiny hand. A third crawled forward, its stiff plastic fingers scraping against the floor. Leah yanked the door open. Run! They bolted down a narrow hallway, their footsteps pounding against the concrete floor. The storage room door slammed shut behind them, but they didn't stop to look back. They ran past rusted assembly lines, past conveyor belts covered in dust, past old machinery that stood like skeletal remains of a forgotten industry. The whispers chased them. Play with us. Stay with us. Forever. The exit sign flickered in the distance. Will reached it first, slamming his body against the double doors. It stuck. Jake and Connor rushed forward, throwing their weight against it. The door groaned, but it wouldn't open. Leah spun around. The hallway behind them was empty. Too empty. The whispering had stopped. The silence was worse. Then tick. A single sound, sharp and unnatural. Tick, 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 came from above. Slowly, their heads tilted upward. Hanging from the ceiling, clinging like grotesque marionettes, were the dolls. Their small, plastic fingers gripped the rusted pipes. Their hollow eyes stared down. And then they let go. A rain of dolls fell toward them. The group screamed. Jake threw himself against the exit again, and this time, the door burst open. They spilled outside into the night, tumbling onto the cracked pavement. Cold air rushed into their lungs. The factory loomed behind them, dark and still. Nothing followed. The whispers were gone. The night was silent. For a long moment, none of them spoke. They just lay there, gasping, shaking, their minds struggling to process what had just happened. Finally, Connor picked up his camera with trembling hands. He checked the footage. The screen flickered. At first, it showed nothing but their panicked escape. The halls, the dolls, the whispers, then static, and then a single frame, a doll's face. His blue eyes stared straight into the lens, and it smiled. The footage cut to black. Connor's breath hitched. He turned the camera off and stood. We're leaving. Now. No one argued. As they walked away, the factory loomed behind them, silent and unmoving. But just as they reached the edge of the lot, giggle. The sound was faint, almost imperceptible, but they all heard it. None of them turned back. They never spoke of it again. But deep in the abandoned factory, where dust-covered toys lay forgotten, the dolls waited, and they were still watching.